We know they're down there. It was October, a cold and dreary one. The first one went missing a day before Halloween, maybe 2 days before. I'm not sure. She was a young girl, around 15. Her name was Cassie Nanton. My mother was a good friend with her parents, so I felt some personal investment because my mother was devastated. However, that personal investment is what deterred the sheriff from letting me help in the search. The sheriff is not a bad person by any means, but she has this idea that officers with personal attachments shouldn't be involved. Says she saw too many good deputies make mistakes, cause the suspect or victim was their sibling or a loved one. Marcus, she tried to comfort me. I know you want to help, but I feel you're becoming too focused on doing this for your mother. And that is admirable, but I need some men to stay in town to watch things while Hector and I lead the search. Understand? Yes, ma'am, I responded. She could tell I didn't mean it, but I still followed orders anyway. That was until the 5th person went missing. At the 6th, every single deputy and person in town was searching. At the 8th, a few started staying at home scared. It was the 9th missing person. It was the end of November at this point when the smell started to drift into the woods. It took me a day to find the source. It was the river. Usually around this time, the river would be frozen up, but this year was much warmer than normal. The river was a good few miles away from town. Normally, that makes the river perfect for canoeing and fishing, but the townspeople don't use it at all. Hell, until this point, I had forgotten it even existed. I was at the riverbank with another cop named Leo Keffer and a school teacher who knew some students that had gone missing. Miss Anderson, I think her name was. We all had managed to stand the smell at first, but Leo at some point left. Miss Anderson stayed though, not much longer, but I can't blame either of them. At first, I didn't want to just assume the smell's origin. As a cop, you never should just assume anything. But after another 20 minutes of patrolling the sandy edge of the dark river that seemed to stretch infinitely across the planet, I found a necklace. It was made of a light silver chain, with a green jewel joining the strand. The jade was encased in a bright gold casing. It belonged to a 24-year-old woman, the 4th disappearance. Her name was Katie Yen. I brought the necklace to the sheriff. She asked where I found this. I told her the river, and suggested that we try to somehow get a dive team set up to search for potential bodies in the river. I was gonna start searching for a diving and salvage crew to hire, maybe call in the FBI, when she stopped me. You sure it was by the river? She asked softly in a voice that would only reach my ears. Yes, ma'am. Also, it smells out by the river. Smells rancid. I think there might be bodies in or nearby the river. She looked at the necklace again and placed it in her pocket. She called up Hector, who was basically second in command at the station. She whispered into his ear. He went off and out of the station. Marcus, she turned to me. I want you to stop searching, especially by that river. Hector is going to tell the others to halt searches as well. I was baffled. I will admit to my mistake of getting very upset. Why stop the search? We have to check the river, I exclaimed. I felt an uneasy air in the room. I think it was me mentioning the river. The word stuck itself into other deputies' heads. I was sent home, but I kept searching on my own. The 11th went missing. He was a schoolboy, only 6 years old. But at this point, they still weren't searching. The sheriff knew that they were in the river. So do I. But I had to see for myself. I brought a video camera, a really expensive one that was built to work underwater and other stressful situations. The idea was to put the camera down with the light to try and record the bodies down there. Maybe find a cause to all of this. The camera went down pretty far from what I could tell. The camera would take a few days to process the footage in high definition. So until then, I continued monitoring the river. 13 were now missing. This is when people started moving away, at least those who could afford it. That day, I found more missing items on the riverbed. Pocket watches, baseballs, shoes of all sizes. I didn't bother sending them to the sheriff. She had already fired me after someone spotted me by the river. 15 now gone. I was searching the riverbanks when I found a ring in the dirt. I didn't think much of it until I picked it up and saw my parents' initials on it. My mom never took off her ring, especially after my father passed. I fell to the earth. I tore into the grass and dirt and ripped it apart. I turned to the cold, murky waters that danced and bobbed. The river's stillness was gone. The river at this point revealed itself to me as what it truly was. A monster. With anger and desperation, I made the nearly fatal error. I tried diving down into the river, but my eyes stung when I entered. I resurfaced and screamed in pain. I felt myself falling, not sinking, falling. Sinking is slow. It takes time to sink. Falling is gravity pushing you down with quick and merciless force. That's what I felt. Like I took a wrong step on the trail and my foot had fallen into a hidden hole in the underbrush. I quickly leaped for the riverbed. I was completely submerged, but I held onto a root in the bed. My eyes still stung, but I managed to keep them open. I looked below me. I knew the river was deep. Some said it was 12 feet. Some even claimed 20. But I didn't see a bottom. In the middle of the riverbed, it sloped into a deep canyon. Half of my body was dangling in the open space over the gap, and I started climbing carefully. When I returned to the bank, my body broke. In the river, it felt like my whole body was being crushed, like the planet's gravity had doubled, if not tripled. 18 gone, my mother included. Her home showed no signs of a struggle or any break-in. The doors were just unlocked. The camera finally processed. At this point, I was preparing to leave town as well. The sheriff was preparing to call the National Guard after more members of the police force disappeared, including Hector. I wanted to just break the damn thing, delete the files, burn it all, but I had to know. It's clear the sheriff knew something. Some people in this wretched town knew as well. I wanted to know. I had to know. So, the night before I left, I booted up the footage and watched what the camera found in the river's canyon. The camera was slowly spinning as it went past the first part of the bank and began descending into the dark abyss that was hidden so well under the dirty currents. The camera was closer to one side of the canyon, the light attached to it illuminating the dirt walls. Eventually, it turned to brownish stone. I saw holes and crevices lining the wall, the light only scratching the mouth of the dark interior. I was focused on the screen, trying to see if I could spot any body parts in the hole, when something slapped the camera. I jumped back and assumed it must have been a fish. But as I looked, I saw the object flailing around. The camera gained some distance as the whole thing came into view. It was a human arm. The skin was wrinkled against the bones. like the muscle and flesh was taken out of the skin and was placed back around the bone like a glove. The hand's ring and pinky finger were missing, bits of ripped skin dangling from where they once were. The camera moved further down. I had assumed the arm was moving from the current, but as the camera showed what it was attached to, I realized it was alive. The arm was dug partially into the wall, where only a few inches a skull and a rib cage protruded from the rock. The skull's half-broken jaw moved up and down like it was saying something. Like the arm, a thin layer of rotted skin covered the skull, while the ribcage's skin was torn between the jagged ribs. I thought I could see what looked like shriveled organs inside. The arm was reaching out for the camera. It looked desperate. The camera spun away as it lowered. When reaching back to the wall, I saw more rotted limbs and faces. As it spun further to the right, I saw hundreds of bodies. The 18 weren't the first. God, how long has this been going on? What was doing this? This was when I pulled the camera up, unaware of what was happening at the time. I was quick to leave the next day. After an hour or two of driving, I got a call that the town was being evacuated by government officials. The sheriff had disappeared. I didn't react much on the call, but that night I broke down, unable to sleep as I imagined my mother, Hector, the sheriff, and all the others being turned into lifeless husks. I don't know how it did it, but I know after months of sleepless nights that the river was behind it. Somehow it got every last one of them, and it had been around for a long time and will still be there, waiting.